former Star Wars producer is suing Disney and Lucasfilm, and doing so in a very, very public manner. Now, that, of course, is a PR nightmare. WDW Pro, please take us through the story. What's going on?
Well, it's an interesting story. It's one that when I covered it, I tried to cover some new information from a source that I bet some of you would know, but we'll keep anonymous. But the source that spoke to me relayed just how odd the hiring was of Leslye Headland, of course, the former personal assistant to one Mr. Weinstein. That Weinstein, well, not a very good person. Let's just leave it at that, and not a good person to the level of going to jail for the rest of one's life. Although worshipped for quite a while in Hollywood by many who knew what he was doing. And you would have to assume also, although I cannot verify, one would assume that a personal assistant to someone guilty of such things would probably know what was going on as well. But I digress, and I would never want to, make false accusations about anybody.
I would even think that such a person might even have enabled and made some phone calls and made some booking. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. Carry on with the story.
If you were to go to a here or there, you might also consider that if your boss was doing things that you knew about, and if those things were very bad, and if they involved people from a certain company with a mouse mascot, that if you were then hired into that company, you might be able to help whoever you're working for protect their own jobs from those who may have been entangled with your former boss, although I am speaking about nobody in particular, and all of that is theory. All right, let's continue on. So at the same time, this is back during the beginning of the pandemic, at the same time that Disney was known to not be taking any pitches whatsoever, even to the point of threatening to blacklist people if they sent stuff in to them. Leslye Headland is hired by pitching something to Disney. Now, that is rather remarkable, but she's brought in during that exact same time frame, to the chagrin of many people saying, how in the world did this happen? And everybody knowing, that their chagrin is explained away by her connections. But she's brought in with this acolyte idea. And Kathleen Kennedy, according to the source that I spoke with, Kathleen Kennedy ruffled feathers big time, and of course she would, at the top levels of Disney. I mean, would it not ruffle feathers if you hired Weinstein's personal assistant at a time when the company has said we're not hiring anybody for new projects or pitches? We're trying to salvage what we've got because we don't know what's going to happen. And yet that's what Kennedy does. She may or may not have been reprimanded for doing that. There may have been some changes in protocols because of that. But Kathleen Kennedy brings in Leslye Headland, and then that same unprofessional, semi-unethical sort of atmosphere that was launched with the very beginning of this project seems to have carried over into the pre-production of it, where we've got this lady, Miss McCarthy, being brought in, and she forfeits, another position. According to the reports we've got, there are signatures on papers. That was sort of unknown a few days ago, but we're starting to learn that, yes, she probably did have some guarantees, some signings that had happened. She's relocating, all this sort of thing. And within 2 weeks, Lucasfilm fires her without any given cause and substantially damages, her livelihood, potentially damages her career, again, without any cause. But the worst part of all of this, all that's bad. But then when she goes to Lucasfilm and says, you've done these things to me, I should be compensated. I had a position. I lost, I gave up my prior position, which was not low on the totem pole, right? She was with Apple. She goes over to Lucasfilm, and now she's saying, fine, you've removed me. You fired me after 2 weeks. I've relocated. I've lost all of this. You need to compensate me at least. Disney gives her $5,000. And that's just ridiculous.
Wait, did she already relocate?
If you read into the report, it's not declared whether or not she had relocated, but that she was working on it.
And one point of clarity, she didn't secure the deal with Apple yet, but both parties were aware both Apple and Lucasfilm were aware of the other one negotiating. And it said that her deal with Apple was going to make her the highest paid producer at Apple.
Okay, so
If
now
she
think
had
about that.
gotten it.
Highest paid producer, and she gets
Yeah.
$5,000 from Disney out of it.
Because what this sounds like to me now, just like based on my previous experience from the world of finance, this sounds like she was playing two potential employers against each other, hoping for a better deal from
I
one
was
of them.
I was gonna say this thing kind of is funky. Because look, I would love to see Lucasfilm get in a lot of trouble, but as our good friend Robert Meyer Burnett says, famously, you never get what you deserve, you only get what you negotiate for. If she's making moves and deciding to do things before she has anything in paper, that's on her. Really,
Well, what we've got to know, and I think, I mean, surely she's got the signatures necessary to have standing for this lawsuit. If she doesn't, then this is a giant nothing burger, like all of you
That's
are
what
saying.
I mean. Yeah.
Right. But if the signatures exist, and we, we'll find out. There's either going to be a settlement, or we go to discovery, or maybe she folds. But I don't think that's going to happen. But we're going to find out whether she has the goods, and if she has the goods, and everybody out there who hates Lucasfilm, wouldn't it be wonderful to get to discovery? I don't think that will happen. I think we'll go to settlement. But man, would we ever love that?
That's the other thing. Yeah, I was going to say, even if this gets anywhere, it's like it'll go to settlement before it goes anywhere.
What I'm thinking she probably has, she has a contract with no counter signature. That would be by my best reading, that she's gotten a deal because she has in writing what they've gone through. A deal has been made. She signed it and sent it in. She didn't get a counter-signed copy in return. That would be my speculation based on everything here. But anyway, that's just a distraction because these are like the potential hurdles here. But carry on with the story. I love you vexing politically.
It's story time.
We just have to find out, does she have, if she has a corresponding signature from Lucasfilm about something, then, we get to find out all sorts of things. But really, what I find interesting about this is that it's a continuing pattern of Lucasfilm where everything that's not connected somehow with Gollum Creations LLC, and what is that? Well, that's the Jon Favreau production company that he owns, and that when Lucasfilm wants to make The Mandalorian, they have to contract with that company. And Favreau has a marvelous sweetheart deal because after the first season of The Mandalorian, Disney was so desperate to have him come back because it was driving Disney Plus subscriptions. And remember, previous to the news in the last 48 hours, we were in an arms race between Disney and Netflix. And so Disney was anything that would possibly drive those sub numbers up they wanted to do. Well, they had given Favreau a sweetheart deal after the first season, which essentially gives him creative control over The Mandalorian, Ahsoka, etc. And so everything in that sort of universe runs through his Gollum's Creation LLC. However, the stuff that's not running through him, that's Lucasfilm proper, this is a continuing pattern where they mistreat the fans, they mistreat actors and actresses, they mistreat directors, and now they mistreat potential showrunners. It's just a giant mess over there. It truly is. And Kathleen Kennedy continues to come across as somebody who's conniving, incompetent, and ultimately inept. Because why hire the assistant director or the assistant to Weinstein at a time when Disney has said don't do that? And why kick off a show that nobody's excited for, that the most exciting thing about it is that it now has a lawsuit facing it?
Well, and again, I mean, you have if and it's 3 trades have now reported, plus many other sources here, including folks that may be on this panel. She had a letter of understanding that was passed back and forth via email. If there is any evidence, like an email that suggests she do X for work, there is precedent set, in court cases that actually go to court, which is rare. As Tom mentioned, this normally would go to arbitration, but they could be on the hook for millions of dollars. She could be a winner here rather easily with enough, with enough evidence there, including any kind of order for work for her to relocate, for her to explore locations, anything like that could indicate that they had an understanding, and this is not, it's not unheard of in Hollywood for this to for these types of contractual things to be enforced, regardless of whether or not there's signatures on documents. Believe it or not.
Let's refer to Script for a little bit here if he's still with us.
Can I?
Because you're somebody. Oh, go ahead.
Because I really want to hear what Script says, but I want to throw this in here while we're on it. Legal Mindset did some coverage with Valiant Renegade that's really good. And he felt like the standard for a verbal contract was probably met by what was released here. But the Hollywood Reporter brought up a good point that there was a lost producer credit on a Charles Manson biopic. That was not settled. There was a verdict reached just a month ago, February 9th. And the writer or the producer got 1.9 million for a movie that is probably not valued at the same level as a Star Wars production.
Yeah. Let me make one point too, and then I want to hand it over to Script. But I left this out, and it's really important. When we're weighing the damages done to her, remember that the negotiations between her and Lucasfilm that we've already found out included that this was and is a major budget production, multi-season, long format episodes, and apparently, given the fact that she is requesting that she be credited in the show, it's ongoing, and so and likely headed towards post-production. So all of that playing into this lawsuit.
Well, I think I've mentioned this before. I'd just like to add real quickly that the reason that this is coming out now, or we're being made aware of it now, or it's actually moving forward now, is because there has been much reporting recently in the last few weeks that they are actually shooting this thing finally in the UK. Is that accurate there, Pro?
That's what I have heard, yes.
Yeah. So there you are. I mean, otherwise this thing might have stayed. I mean, if this never actually got off the ground, maybe she doesn't do anything with this. But now that it's seemingly off the ground, exactly. it gives her a case. So yeah.
Script, what you got?
Well, I will just say that because in given the choices that she had with the Apple offer and the Lucasfilm offer, and the fact that she went to Lucasfilm, especially during that time, because I believe this happened last year, like late last year is when all this negotiating and whatnot was occurring.
I think it's April, wasn't it?
Yeah, April
last year.
April
last year. Okay,
22nd is when everything went wrong.
So that is actually what it actually tells you is the state of the industry, or the perception of the industry at that time, where this person who's essentially a third party observer of Disney at this point, she's not involved. She's being courted by them. And she's saying, between Apple and Disney, I'm going to go with Disney at a time where they haven't had any real successful feature films in the last few years. Marvel is hemorrhaging money. Star Wars hasn't been doing well. Obi-Wan did terribly. Nobody's watching Andor. Book of Boba Fett crashed. But you know what? I'm going to go over to that studio and work on Acolyte. Instead of working at Apple, which has had a lot of financially successful shows. They haven't really trended on social media, but they haven't had anywhere near as negative of criticism as Disney has had. So that's telling with regards to the fact that the industry at hand has no idea what's going on outside of their bubble, even for a person that, by all accounts, should be well aware of what's going on. And they still picked with Disney. That's actually kind of concerning.
That's actually something that I noticed as well. It's like, okay, here you have Apple that has no money issues whatsoever, and she chose seemingly to go with Disney and Lucasfilm when it's obvious to all of us that is the option that's likely to blow up in her face. If not this way, then some other way. That they planned multiple sequels, seasons, may not be any more than one, and that might be a disaster, just based on the talent behind. So,
and how many
bad decision.
They've announced and not actually gone through, the amount of talent they've hired that have ended up leaving to go to other studios for other projects. There's a very obvious
I've pointed out,
yeah.
Kathleen Kennedy has fired more directors than have actually worked for her.
But now, guys, you don't discount the entire Forces female narrative here. There are a lot of people in Hollywood who the idea of working for who they believe to be the most powerful woman in the industry is very alluring to them. And so you can see how some of the top women in the industry might say to themselves, yes, I would love to work with Kathleen Kennedy.
Oh, 100%. The other part too that would actually tempt her away, and justifiably so, is the fact that Apple's offer would make her the highest paid producer at Apple Studios, because that comes with its own set of clout that follows, and allows her options to move up even further, to the point where she could probably be one of the most powerful female producers within Apple. And if Apple does successfully cross over into theatrical releases, that could then make her on competition in competitive sphere closer to Kathleen Kennedy herself. And any producer worth their salt would be able to see that pattern. If you have those two big, huge studios vying for you for a single job, it really felt like she was going with her perception of what was the safest option was very misconstrued, I would say.
Do you think
Well, hindsight, you know what they say.
Exactly. But at that point in April, or even before then, all the tell signs were there. Like, that's just it. If she were really in connection with audiences, with how the state of the industry was, understanding the fact that pandemic stipulations are being lifted, and people are going back to theaters, and you can see which shows are trending and which aren't. It's just weird that a producer whose entire job is to actually pay attention to those things, even on the writing side of stuff as well, because again, you want to curtail what you're writing to try and appeal to the broadest demographic you can. It just boggles my mind that, given two options between any other studio that isn't going through the nightmares that Disney is, that you would still go with them. I think it's basically prestige over rationality at this point.
Everybody wants to work for Blue Stockings.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that is my question here, is if all of that led to, okay, well, can people play hardball with Lucasfilm when it's Kathleen Kennedy? Now, Disney, I think they're notoriously low on their payment contracts, generally speaking. But Kathleen Kennedy has shown that she is willing to pay large amounts of money to fix mistakes. And if she viewed this as something that was a mistake before that Karen McCarthy was coming in to fix, I wonder if that means that the negotiation price went up and up and up, or if there was something else here that would have drawn her to Lucasfilm above Apple. Not judging the whole gender here when I say this, but women tend to be less interested in Star Wars, unless the present point of conversation excluded. So I really would love to know if that dollar figure comes to light. I know it's not going to go to Discovery, because it would be a huge black eye to the Disney company right now when they need all the goodwill they can get. But how I would love if figures started leaking out.
Well, I suspect that there's probably another, within the negotiation prospects, there's probably something that this Karen McCarthy wanted to work on, that in doing this, they would say they'd give like either a right of first refusal or a possibility of, financing as well, some sort of adjacent deal, because at the end of the day, that's kind of what you want to negotiate. If you're getting hired to work on spec for an IP, and that's all you're negotiating for, it's kind of a little bit foolish. You should really be trying to throw in, especially if they really want you. It's like, well, I've got this other project I'm dying to get on. So if I work for you, will you, massage or help me get this financed so that I can put this into production, and you guys get your taste as well? Like, that's part of the negotiating process. It also works into the favor of the studio, because sometimes if you do hit well, the first thing they come to you with is, what else do you got? And if you have something that, and you built a good relationship, that further strengthens the relationship and gives them stuff that they can jump in with and pursue. The only thing we have to find out is, was she actually working on spec, or were contracts signed, or not even fully signed? She signed them, and then, as Andre postulated, they didn't confirm it. And what other aspects of the deal that would be lucratively of interest to her were attached to that? What were the negotiations? What were the memorandums? What were the letters of intent that were going between them all? Because those can all play into a factor to kind of give this case some credence. But at the end of the day, especially with the internal workings of Hollywood, if there isn't a confirmed contract signed that stipulates that this is a go, then she might have grounds to stand on. It might have standing. But from the stuff that I have read that the trades have released, it seems like they were right in the final stages of completing that contract, and then they pulled out, and she had already started working, which is also very weird for a producer of her standing and working in as many years as she has. She shouldn't even like put pen to paper until a contract was signed.
I'll add one additional item here. The law firm that is representing her is UTA's law firm, although they are representing her and not UTA. United Talent Agency. What I know them as UTA. I don't know
she's with UTA.
Yes, but it's the lawsuit is separate from a UTA lawsuit, even though it is that law firm that usually represents.
You know, that's interesting because I was going to say, because I think if there was that,
because
to me
UTA
feels
would
like
want a piece of that.
Exactly. I was going to say, so that tells me that either, I mean, that's funky because that means that there might be something there, but I don't know if there's enough there for UTA themselves to think that they have a chance at anything, like Script was just saying. But there may be just enough to hang this on that they're helping her out on the other end. Like,
well, it's not so much helping her out. If you're with UTA, you know they're legal firms.
Well, there you go. So
it's like if UTA is not part of this lawsuit, because again, they would get their commission off of that deal, then they probably don't think they can get away with it. They have a case worth standing on. And if she is doing this of her own accord, using their law firm to try and intimidate Disney, which is not going to work, this might end up becoming a nothing burger by the end of the day.
But then again, the other thing I would think about is you're talking about high-level attorneys, high-level firms.
Mm-hmm.
I would suspect they would not take her unless they thought there was something to this. Now, we're all deep in the speculation territory. So,
yeah. Well, that's the thing with Hollywood lawyers, especially ones that represent clients, is that any lawsuit in California or from California lawyers, they get paid either way. They'll take it. They don't care if they're win or lose. They still get their money. It's the only people that win in lawsuits in Hollywood are the lawyers.
Oh yeah. See, I understand that part of it. And that's where I thought that was kind of an interesting, difference. Go ahead, Carl.
No, I just let me suggest something else, that perhaps UTA doesn't want to get into a fist fight with Disney Lucasfilm right now, but they want their client to, because they will still get a piece of it if she wins the case. So, and
that's
again,
what I was going to get to too.
I strongly suspect that, again, and I'm going to keep saying it, and I think anybody who says this is probably right, spot on. This is going to go to arbitration before it ever goes to court. Right. I think one of the wonderful folks in the chat suggested that you never actually see the discovery here. They don't want anything to get to that point. So, and here's the funny thing. If they didn't believe they had an obligation, they never should have made an offer of the $5,000 to begin with. Because now you have an indication.
Oh, that's a casino. You've nailed it. I had not thought of that.
That's a problem.
The fact that they paid her anyways out of quote unquote inconvenience would denote that she was indeed intended to be working long term.
Yep.
And it's kind of against Disney's MO, really. So you're right, culture. That's probably going to be the linchpin here.
Yeah. Like I said, any good attorney is going to reference that first and foremost and run with it there. And I guarantee you that's probably what Legal Mindset was thinking.
Because we know from people like Gary Ambrosia and others who have said that Disney don't even like to pay last paychecks. So the fact that they would pay somebody out of inconvenience, you're right, culture. That's a huge linchpin in this case. I think you got a point.
I'll add this. Okay, so just to add clarity to the filing, the one from Deadline that Deadline is referencing has a big stamp of unfiled on it. Although we do know that something was filed with the Los Angeles County Superior Court. This one says that it's full count, which is Karen McCarthy's loan out corporation, and Karen McCarthy are the plaintiffs. So yeah, it's not UTA.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, and again, that would make sense. And again, if you're going to get paid, UTA gets paid either way. I mean, well, they get paid on whatever she earns, or their percentage. So, like I said, I suspect that utilizing their law firm, gives her some extra teeth. But again, again, if they offered compensation in any form or fashion, then they are assuming some level of culpability in the transaction.
Yes, but there's also the aspect, and I've actually seen this firsthand, where an individual will sue for wrongful termination without the agency, and because it's a lawsuit and it's not necessarily earnings, the agency had no claim to it, and because the agency then sued them, and the court ruled against them because, again, the contract had been terminated, which means that the agency did not join in the suit with that particular individual. So the person did it of their own accord. And because they're the ones that facilitated gaining the compensation for the wrongful termination, the agency thought they were entitled to a piece of that. But because they had no stake in it, they made no effort to co-chair that case. The judge said, sorry, you actually didn't do your job as a representative. And they did all the work, so they get all the money.
I'm
not
suing Disney for not hiring me.
You should.
That is called the Chicken Little Law, I believe, Script. No, I'm just kidding. That's a joke. Yeah, we should get to some of these super chats here. This is going to be a very interesting case. We're not going to know more until there's more developments in it.
And Valiant
it makes for flashy headlines, but I think you're right. Culture is going to end up in arbitration.
Yeah, and Valiant added some context in a member chat just a second ago. So,
well, let's see what that is, and that'll kind of break us into the chats of the day because we're going to be losing people here pretty soon. Let's see here. 6 hasn't got to it yet. I don't think. I'm not seeing it here. Unless it was from
this discussion has been so dry, I haven't been able to add jokes to it.
I know, right? Me too.
You're welcome.
Kind of useless today.
Culture is happy.
But what Valiant said was it says unfiled, likely because the law firm submitted that to the press concurrently with the courts. So there's no official copy at the time yet produced as filed. Yeah, I was gonna say that's a probability, and there you go. Thank you, 6. So yeah, that's very possible as to why it says unfiled on